Yeah, yeah, that's why.
Okay, so I think it's 7:31 right now. And Sharma, can we go ahead?
Sure. Sure, go ahead.
All right. So welcome to the Milan's youth discussion today. And I would like to just quickly brief about that. Milan Culture Association is a voluntary driven non-profit association of people from India living in the United States. This is a community service organization celebrating the traditional art and culture of India and mainstream America and our Indian diaspora. Milan have various chapters and members across the United States of America. Milan believes in sharing and caring for the mainstream American issues. A community we live in also supports, collaborates, and participates in all the mainstream and Indian diaspora events to foster constructive partnership and interactive relationship with mainstream local communities, institutions, policymakers, academicians, in order to build a bridge of mutual understanding, interest, and trust, contributing towards the strength of America. So we would like to go with, and I would request our chairman of Milan, Suresh Sharma ji, to just proceed for the today's program.
Thank you, Hari. And this is a hi, to all the attendees from myself, along with, Hari Sharma, who is a Zoom, wizard, I'll put it, and our two, grand moderators, saying, welcome to you all, with us being in this evening. In this evening, we are ready to take you on a ride in a journey train with all these four smarties, these four, panelists. These panelists, they are right freshly out of the graduate schools, Two of them have just started their chosen, path of their career, and the other two are just getting ready to fly to fulfill their dreams. And this evening, I can assure you one thing, that you will have a really cherished and full of nostalgic experience when you're riding, with these four panelists. And you will be really surprised to see how happily they surprise, these moderators. Let me now introduce you to the moderators. We have with us Dr. Prasad Srinivasan, an allegist, by profession, but highly admired and respected personality among the Indians as well as American community. He is a four-time Connecticut state representative, a treasurer of the National Physician Association, which is known as American Physician Associations of American Physicians from India, decorated with numerous awards. I can tell you it's unbelievable when I see the awards, he got. And when I asked him, at least give me, some awards, he said, what you're asking, should I give you that you will take the whole 1 hour, talking about my awards? I said, okay, give me 3 only. And the 3 which he has given to me is the Alice Award, recognition of contribution by immigrants to our community, our society. The second is the fantastic one, is the Connecticut State Medical Society Legislators Award. It's a very prestigious award because it involves the whole, state of Connecticut. Then comes the Avalon Universal School of Medicine Doctors of Community Services. He's a man known for the community services. He's a man known for helping the community and supporting, a lot of associations. Hats off to him. That's what I could say. The second one is our very soft-spoken Professor Jaya Vijayashekhar. She is highly involved in the field of education. Highly involved to that extent that she started working as a teacher, moving to program coordinator, becoming principal, and a district administrator. And she has served as the president of the Connecticut Council of Language Teachers. As a linguist, with command on 5 foreign languages, she was the 2010 chair of the Northeast Conference on the teaching of foreign languages. Currently, she is on faculty at Eastern Connecticut State University, teaching methodology, Spanish, and second language acquisition. She's very much, highly active in the community services, and always, of course, when we need some help, she's always there, to give us how to go in the right direction. Thank you very much for joining us as a moderator for this evening today.
Thank you.
But now, I think I lose my heartbeats because of the excitement I'm having in introducing these youngsters. And the first one, which I'm seeing is Sapna Raghavan. Look at her with the red, sweater or what else. A recent graduate she is from Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute in Troy, New York. She is magna cum laude with a BS in business management and a minor in professional writing. Good enough. She is awaiting her full-time job to start, with the Deloitte Consulting in Boston, which she is waiting because of this, pandemic. It's holding, a lot of things. She promotes unity in diversity. And meantime, she has been interning with US Senator Richard Blumenthal's office this fall. Hey, it's a good thing you're doing it. And has been enjoying the new exposure to the politics and public policy. Then comes, Ishan Sharma, the second one. Filming with US Senator Richard Blumenthal. Say? Okay. Ishan is a heartbeat of Scoville Junior Peace Fellow at the Federation of American Scientists. He holds a BS from Cornell University and has studied law at the University of Oxford. Hey, you have both the things, law as well as your BS. He leads, FAS projects on AI and international security, which focuses on ways to strategically counter digital authoritarianism and safeguard the leapfrog development of digitalizing countries into information age. You're into a lot of tough subjects. At least I'm finding, even reading out few of those. Well, I wish you all the success in it. Then we have Aziz with us, and Aziz Sandhu serves as a Connecticut Co-State Director for South Asians for Biden and is a second-year Master's in Science for Public Health. She's candidate at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Service and Health Policy and has interned at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services with Senator Chris Murphy office. Hey, both of you are there with our senators here in Connecticut. And with the Connecticut Department of Children and Families. She currently works at a as a research assistant supporting capacity building initiatives with the International Institute of Primary Health Care. The country is Utopia, and holds a BA in Global Health from the University of Connecticut. Well, with the credentials you have, there will be a bright future for you, Aziz. Coming to our, one of the final panelists, number 4, Pranav Mahal is a recent graduate of the State University of New York at Fredonia, where he majored in business finance. Pranav was a part of Anactus. It's an international collegiate organization that aims to improve communities, where he was an executive committee members and also lead a team of nearly 200 students. Pranav was also a frequent member of the Dean's List. He has also held several internships with Fortune 100 companies. Well, when you're into the field of improving communities, Pranav, good luck to you. And with these introductions, I pass it over to our two, moderators to take you into this journey of these youngsters. Over to the moderators, please.
Thank you, Mr. Suresh Sharma. I want to take this opportunity to thank Milan organization for putting together this very timely panel discussion. It is my honor to have the opportunity to work once again with our co-moderator, Jaya Vijay. The panelists, I appreciate your participation this evening, and I am as enthusiastic as you are enthusiastic to hear your comments on the very timely subjects that we are going to raise. Just so that we're all aware of the overall guidelines, the topics that we are going to discuss this evening have not been shared with the panelists, so they will be hearing it for the very first time. 3 panelists will be asked questions. We're going to have 4 questions that we're going to ask. 3 of the panelists will be given 2 minutes to respond and to share their thoughts on that topic. And each panelist, after that's concluded, will be given 1 minute for their concluding comments on that subject matter. So having done the first 4 questions, time permitting, we have 2 more questions that we hope to have the opportunity to bring up 2 important topics as well in the time that is ahead of us. And each panelist will now be given 2 minutes. Each panelist will be given 2 minutes to respond and share their thoughts and views on that subject matter. There will be no follow-up time. I request the panelists to be sure that they keep within the time frame, respectful of time, the 2 minutes that you are given to answer and respond and share your comments on the questions that you have been asked. And also, please do not interrupt when anybody else is speaking so that we can hear clearly the thoughts of our young panelists. So with these general guidelines that we would like to follow this evening, my first question goes to Aziz, to Ishan, and to Sapna. And of course, as you remember, Pranav will have the opportunity also to talk about that subject matter for a minute. The pandemic that is here with us, unfortunately, I'm told by all accounts, the worst is yet to come. As we all know, the Trump administration has had the unfortunate opportunity to deal with this pandemic. The Obama-Biden administration has also had its share with the swine flu H1N1 epidemic that they had to deal with. So given that the pandemic is an unfortunate, harsh reality, impacting the lives of each and every one of us, I would request Aziz, Ishan, and Sapna to share with us in 2 minutes each which administration, in their opinion, is better equipped for the next phase of the pandemic and why. Aziz?
Sure. Thank you so much to everyone for joining us for this event. And thank you to the organizers for putting this together and for inviting me. I feel very humbled to be here. In response to that question, I think, this is such a challenging time for so many people, especially considering, the devastation that Connecticut particularly experienced here in the Northeast in the beginning of this pandemic. It really hit this community quite hard. And I think with regards to which administration would be better, in my opinion, I really believe that the Biden administration is the only, the Biden campaign is the only campaign currently that has a robust plan and also has a record of listening to scientists and listening to public health experts rather than vilifying them and stoking misinformation and other forms of truly violence to our community here. And thinking about pandemic response, the reality is that it did not have to be this bad here in the United States. The U.S. government knew that there was a threat that was emerging. There was an opportunity to respond, and instead there were concerted attempts to silence public health officials at the CDC, even within their own coronavirus response task force, which is super, really, really unfortunate. The fact that over 200,000 people in this country have unfortunately lost their life was avoidable, and it did not have to be like this. The upheaval that has happened to people's everyday did not have to be this bad. And truly, I think the thing that is remarkable with the way that these two campaigns have been operating is that you can see the contrast. You can see the difference between the Biden campaign that has actively been integrating public health guidelines and elevating the voices of scientists and expertise, in contrast to the other candidate, the president, who has literally been hosting super spreader events.
Thank you, Aziz. You have 5 seconds left. If you want to. No.
Sure. No, just to conclude, I think that the contrast is so clear, and it would be irresponsible, I think, to re-elect this president, given the opportunity to do something here. And instead, things have just been getting progressively worse. Thank you.
Thank you, Aziz. Thank you for sharing your thoughts and your opinions. I will go to Ishan, and Ishan, 2 minutes. And 15 seconds before your 2 minutes are up, with your kind permission, I will just give you a 15-second warning. Thank you. Ishan?
So first, I'd like to thank everyone for coming here to listen to us. I think it's incredible being able to cross generational divides and opinions and thoughts. So I really appreciate the work that the Milan Cultural Association is putting on right now. I think in terms of answering the question, I would echo a lot of what Aziz had said. I think So a lot of my work focuses, so at the Federation of American Scientists, where I work directly under the president, and his role as a scientist in the public health field pretty much is evident in the fact that very often this administration has disregarded the views of scientists. I think that that's probably the most important and critical factor in order to create a cogent response to a pandemic. Plenty of people have been talking about for a while, US infrastructure is not capable of handling a pandemic right now. Nothing was done about that. But I think to conflate this swine flu example, as we've seen in the debate, and equate that to like the current response is a little bit of a misnomer, right? I think the really important part to consider is how is the US held up in comparison to other countries? And looking at the responses, if you do want to equate swine flu, we handled it far better than any other country did at that time period. But even now, our response has been severely lacking in contrast to every other country. So in addition to the disinformation, where there's plenty of articles reporting Trump as being the leading pumper of misinformation into the society, talking about herd immunity, I think like the collective ethos of the administration in response to the pandemic has been very, very wrong. I think that it's worth reconsidering how a Biden administration, considering purely off the fact that they're willing to listen to scientists, that Robert Redfield, like titan of public health, former CDC director, had said this is the worst response we've seen to a pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you, Ishan, very much. You're right on time. I didn't even need to give you a 10-second warning. I appreciate you being so efficient with your thoughts and your comments on the subject matter. And the final 2 minutes on this subject will go to Sapna. Sapna?
Well, thank you. Again, I want to echo what Ishan and Aziz both mentioned. It's awesome that you're having this event and letting us share our thoughts and opinions. But exactly what they said, I echo that as well. I think this is the greatest public disaster that America has faced since World War II. We've seen that cited in so many different ways. This was a disease with no modern comparison. When you think about the swine flu, that was a disease that was not nearly as severe as this one is. And so I echo what Ishan said in terms of if you're going to use that as the precedent, then that in itself was handled so much better. So how can we compare these two situations? And I agree that the Biden administration is what's going to take us going forward. They knew in January, and it's the repeated feeling for us Americans, feeling like we are the last to the party. We're the last ones to know anything. When in reality, as Americans, we should be exposed to what exactly is going on. If not first, we should at least be second, And so I do think it's really important that going forward, we try our best and the administration tries their best to manage as they go forward. I really hope that the Biden administration brings forward a federal mandate that masks be required to be worn in the workplace. I come from a small business family, as many of you know, and my dad, we do a manufacturing business. So my dad can't work from home. He needs to be in the shop. And we have tried so hard over these past few months to bring forward ways to make sure distancing is followed and sanitizing and everything is going on. But then we have people who come to our shop to deliver things who refuse to wear masks. Everything that we put in place is completely gone when someone comes in there without following the same rules. So I think it's extremely important that as we go forward, a federal mandate be brought forward. And like I said, yep. And like I said, the Biden administration, I think, is the only hope that we have left.
Thank you, Sapna, very much. And as we had talked about in the format of this panel discussion, each one of you, and we'll begin with Pranav and then go to Aziz and conclude with Sapna. So Pranav goes first. He's not had a chance to talk on the subject matter. Pranav, unfortunately, you just get 1 minute and 1 minute for their comments on the subject matter of the pandemic and who's better equipped to handle what is in store for us.
Thank you very much, Dr.
Pranav.
I just want to start off by thanking Milan for organizing this virtual event, and happy Dussehra to everyone that celebrates. In response to your question, Dr. Prasad, I think it's a really easy question to answer, and it's the Biden administration. When you look at previous presidents and Joe Biden and even Kamala Harris, I feel like they have done more to portray the positive things and the necessary steps that Americans need to take to combat the COVID-19 pandemic. Even at the store today, I was getting some groceries and I saw, a family of 4 walking around without masks. These are the things that are preventing us from returning to society as it was before. So I think, the way Kamala Harris, hit it on the nail. She said, imagine if we knew what Trump knew on January 28th. We would not have seen a mass horde of toilet paper shortages, paper product shortages at stores. So when you try and look at what the Biden administration has done, they've already combated and handled a pandemic in the past. So I think they're very well equipped to do that in the future.
Thank you very much for now. Now Aziz, Ishan, and Sapna, you do not need to feel obliged to make any comment. So then obviously we'll go on to the next question, but you do have the floor, each of you, for a minute each. Let's go with Aziz. If she has anything to say, we would love to hear from you.
Yeah,
Sure,
and Dr. Prasad, I want to quickly request Pranav, next time, can you please come closer to the phone because you are not audible and I am getting some comments from the participants. So sorry for the interruption.
Thank you. Two things I think I just wanted to, end with. The first thing was that the Obama administration centered their pandemic response and created systems and structures to make sure that things like Zika and things like the swine flu did not turn into what COVID has become, and the Trump administration has effectively dismantled them. The other thing too is that when I was I had an opportunity to work at HHS very briefly, and one thing that we were working on was a full whole of government exercise called Crimson Contagion, which in the event that the United States had to deal with a pandemic influenza-like illness, what would we do? There was a full report that was written about it. It's been widely cited in New York Times. And the thing is, the United States government has had many opportunities the Trump administration has had many opportunities to right this wrong and to do something better and to prepare. And so this is just unacceptable. And the fact that people have died is unacceptable. So.
Thank you, Aziz. I appreciate your follow-up. Ishan, do you have any comments to make? A minute.
Say briefly that I think the standard by which the administration has been attempting to define their response indicates the harmfulness, the failure at which they've been responding. And so going forward, we should be really careful about how we measure public responses. Are we just attempting to use previous instances of the swine flu, which is a total misnomer? Like, you can't compare two totally different diseases and act as if that's some sort of basis to judge a contemporaneous response. And I think how we judge those are based on those metrics. I would believe that a Biden administration would be more forthcoming, more transparent about the truth of the response. And I think that there's a lot of value in that, especially considering the millions of Americans who are dealing with this pandemic under misinformation, under loss of family, under so many harmful features. So I'll end there.
Thank you, Ishan. Thank you very much. If I can request you the next time, could you come a little bit closer to the mic so that we get to hear you a little better than what we can. We do hear you well, but sometimes you fade off. So if you can just keep that in mind, I appreciate that. Yeah. Can I have the final comment on this subject matter by Sapna?
Yeah, I totally agree with the both of them. But something else that I wanted to point out is that, in past administrations, whether that be the Obama administration or the Bush administration, we saw the president take responsibility for something that they were doing or were around for when it happened, regardless of whether it was their personal act or something that was completely out of their hands. They took responsibility for it because at the end of it all, you are the face of America. And as we see repeatedly, specifically during this virus, we see President Trump blame it on China, call them names, racially charged names. We see him just make a complete joke out of the entire administration. And I think it's disappointing as young people when we look up to the president when we're little kids up until now and beyond, to see the president not take responsibility and see these the COVID-19 virus right up in front of our eyes in our own communities and not see that from the president. So
Thank you very much, Sapna. It is very interesting for us to see that the four panelists all agreed on the first question as to which administration moving forward is better equipped to deal with the crisis, unfortunately, that we are going to face tomorrow, the day after, and unfortunately for months to come. Thank you very much, all of you. And I'm going to turn it over to my co-host, Jaya. Jaya?
Thank you, Prasad. So we will start with the question 2, which will first go to Pranav and followed by Sapna and then Ishan. Each of you will have 2 minutes to respond and then 1 minute to all 4, starting with Aziz, Ishan, Sapna, and Pranav. So we'll start off with Pranav. So here's your second question, panelists. This question deals with our environment and climate change. The increased carbon and methane emissions and the resulting global warming will have a devastating impact, not only on our lives, but on the American economy as well. Many areas of our country are being ravaged by catastrophic weather events brought about by climate change. What do you think the administration should do to protect and preserve our environment and reverse our trajectory towards such destruction and preserve our environment for future generations? So we will start with Pranav.
Thank you, Professor. That's a great question. One of the things about 2020 on a positive side that has come out of this year is that I've become more aware of the problems that face our environment on a daily basis. I have a friend, one of my closest friends is an environmental engineer at Johns Hopkins. So, he's well versed with some of these statistics that we're facing on a daily basis. To answer your question, the first thing that comes to mind is simply re-enter the Paris Climate Agreement. It speaks volumes that the entire world is on the same page about carbon emissions, except for the United States. I think it was really embarrassing as a country that we pulled out of that agreement, only because it seems like, not to bring it back to COVID, but yet again, we're ignoring basic science. We're ignoring, every expert on this subject matter. And so aside from re-entering the Paris Climate Agreement, I think we have to look at countries that have been taking this seriously, such as Amsterdam. In Amsterdam, many of you may or may not know that every single taxi there or public transportation is 100% electric. And so if we can, make tax incentives for people to buy electric vehicles and continue to make that an increased norm, I think we will be on an extremely, extremely higher trajectory path towards fixing our environment.
Okay, thank you. And within time, I appreciate that. Very nice. So we will move to Sapna. 2 minutes, Sapna.
Yeah, so I totally agree with what Pranav was saying, which is, again, funny that we are all agreeing. But I do think one of the first things that needs to be addressed is that it exists. I think we've been seeing from the Trump administration that there's varying opinions on whether or not climate change is really an issue, something that we should talk about. And I think it's pretty clear it is something that we need to talk about. There are reports from so many different sources that state how this is affecting us. And I know all of us in Connecticut can definitely relate to, we're getting hurricanes now, we're in a drought, there are clear effects of these issues, the California fires. And so I think what we can do going forward is something that I actually came across while I was reading. The Climate Accountability Institute states that 71% of greenhouse gas emissions come from just 100 companies. I found that very interesting. I have a business background, so when I hear stuff like that, I'm like instantly in. So, it's great that we as individuals are taking efforts to try and improve our personal carbon footprint. We are using reusable materials, banning of plastic straws, solar panels, all those things, such great things that we're all trying to implement. But I think it's important that those big corporations take accountability and responsibility, something that I had just said in the last question. I think it's really important that, you know, they stand up for what they've been doing and how they've been choosing the short-term profit mentality over the long-term damages that they're doing globally. And I think it's very important. Of course, you have some great companies like Tesla where they're seeing that its advantages to go forward with such, you know, reusable energy and other types of ways you can improve. Okay. And I do think that we need to kind of move investors away from investing in fossil fuels. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Sapna. Appreciate it. So we will move to Ishan's response.
Yeah, so I have a feeling we're going to end up agreeing, us panelists, on quite a bit. But I would say that I think, as Sapna pointed out rightly, I think that there's a crucial necessity to respond to market incentives in our like capitalist framework. So one of the ways to do that is a carbon tax, right? Another way to do that is also to stop fossil fuel subsidies, right? These subsidies have literally made it more competitively advantageous to invest in oil and gas, which is just, it doesn't make sense at this point. And so shifting those investments with renewable energies would help us a tremendous amount. But as Pranav pointed out, like there's almost a crucial, like none of that would matter unless there's an so it's almost necessary that we rejoin the Paris Accords in order to stimulate, like create this momentum as a collective world, not just a specific country focus. Because the reality is, unless we can get India and China as well on board and make it so that it works for both economies, or really all economies internationally, we're just going to keep running in circles. So I think the last thing that I would say is that a lot of my work focuses on artificial intelligence. And so I personally believe that technology is the future, as it always has been. And so I think one of the ways that we could leverage our international standing or position as like an AI leader in the world is to leverage our like dominance over semiconductors in order to stimulate investment in a lot of digitizing countries, but stimulate renewable investment. So what kind of AI companies are investing in those countries? Is it the 71%? Or sorry, is it the 100 companies that are producing 71% of greenhouse gas emissions? And what types of investments are there? Are there actual like stimulated investments to make the governance structures improve? So I think coordinating those international responses are probably the most crucial thing that is lacking from our contemporaneous response, but probably the most important thing overall in this discussion.
Thank you, Ishan. Appreciate it. Thank you. Before the buzzer. So now we will move to 1 minute to everyone. And again, if you have something to add, we'd definitely like to hear your thoughts. So we'll start with always with the first person who did not get a chance with the 2 minutes response, and that would be Aziz.
Hi, I would echo a lot of what everyone else has mentioned. And I think there will be quite a bit of agreement happening tonight. But I think the one thing I would add is just moving forward, I think there should be some reimagination happening with the way that we handle and think about, you know, green policies and, you know, creating a new robust economy and replacing some jobs and industries that are not conducive to the goals of combating climate change, and also doing that in a way that is equitable and empowers low and middle income people. That is something I would recommend. And then also just doing a really clear job evaluating the real health and, you know, the real public health and human impact of climate change in terms of severe weather events.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Sure.
So we're going to move with a 1 minute response to Ishan.
Right. So I would also echo that. I think the thing we have to realize is that it's probably likely that unless Miami is underwater, right, we're going to start responding appropriately, effectively, understand the gravity, like this, what's at stake, really, the magnitude of what's at stake. And I think our generation is trying desperately to avoid that. Like, I think our generation understands that this is probably one of the most existential issues, not just for ourselves, but for like our children. A lot of people like my age are saying how it's irresponsible to even have kids, right? So what kind of culture are we creating as a society that sort of disregards the future for the present? I think that just doesn't make sense. Those are the wrong lessons we should be teaching my generation, but the generations to come after. So.
Thank you. All right, so we've got Sapna next.
Yeah, so yeah, something that Ishan mentioned is that, our generation is working so hard to make sure this is an important discussion, and I agree with him. And so I just kind of wanted to address, since we are Indian American, this is of course impacting India. And I know that sometimes, I talk about this with aunties and uncles, and I hear them tell me, oh no, this is not happening. This is like totally just an American problem. They just want to talk about it, whatever. But no, this is really impacting India as well. I'm sure we've all seen the floods going on, the precipitation increases all over India, or the opposite with the severe droughts and the warming. And, given the full range of those climate scenarios in India, they're projecting that there will be damages of around $1 to $11 billion per year by 2100. Yeah, so I just wanted to share that this is a serious problem, regardless of where you're living. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, so, and finally, Pranav.
Just to summarize, my previous responses, I just wanted to say that, this past May was the hottest May on record. And from personal observation, that's not the first time we've seen that. I've been seeing that since, 2016, 15, 14. So that's a really, really eye-opening statistic and observation. And one other thing that should open everyone's eyes to the cruise line industry. In 2018, the cruise line industry committed more in greenhouse emissions than every single car in the European Union. So.
All right. Thank you so much. And thank you for finishing on time. I really appreciate it. I appreciate all of your thoughts on this subject. Very, very informative, and it makes the rest of us really think about it as well. So we're going to move to the next question, and over to you, Prasad.
Thank you very much, Jaya. It is always said, like minds agree. And it looks like with the first two questions, the minds have all agreed on the first two questions we raised, which of course is important that you all have similar ideas and thoughts on the subject matter. And let's see the next set of questions, how much of debate, discussion, and agreement, disagreement we will be able to conjure among ourselves. Question number 3 begins with Pranav, goes on to Ishan and Aziz. And Sapna, of course, will lead with a 1-minute response when it's her turn. We as a nation are seeing the impact of racial discrimination. In the years and the decades that I've lived in this country, I've never seen this racial discrimination divide being as acute as it is right now. And we have worked under various administrations, both sides of the aisle. Then why all of a sudden, or for some time going on, there is so much insecurity, so much of fear between the minorities and including the Indian American community as well? We will begin with Pranav.
Racism is one thing that has been really, really exposed in 2020. I think it's very prevalent that systemic racism has always been and continues to be a struggle for many African Americans. So I just want to run through some numbers that I found a while ago. So a white household median income is 10 times larger than the average African American household. 25% of African Americans are considered to be in poverty. 10% of African Americans lack any form of healthcare. In the NFL, only 2 of 32 NFL teams have African American head coaches, even though 70% of NFL players are African American. African Americans, in response to COVID-19, have been hit the hardest. It's estimated that about 25% of COVID-19 fatalities have been in the African American community. Until we as a country acknowledge, accept, and understand what's going on systemically, we cannot move forward with many, many topics. And with the election at hand in just a matter of a few days, I honestly am not impressed with either Joe Biden or the current president's response to systemic racism. I think both sides can do more to combat that and to make any sort of improvement. It seems like we're really far away, which is a shame.
Thank you very much for now. And I appreciate for the first time that you brought about both the administrations and the dissatisfaction, in your opinion, in terms of not doing enough, whether it be one or the other. So that opens up the subject even more. And I will now go to Isha.
So I think I would echo a lot again as what Pranav said. I think that one thing I would like to add though is this notion of racism is not just rooted from slavery, it's rooted in repeated instances of public policy, re-entrenching the discrimination and systemic disadvantage of tons of minorities. And so you look at like the Federal Housing Administration, right, which provides subprime loans to minorities based on the color of their skin for no other reason, which is systematically denied them access to generational wealth for housing, the single greatest creator of wealth in America. So you begin to understand that even if you look at healthcare, right, the Hill-Burton Act of 1946 literally created the infrastructure to prevent African Americans from being able to access healthcare based on where we place hospitals and how we finance those and resource those hospitals. So I think what's really important here is that we have to understand it's not just a couple of bad actors. We've essentially over the last 100, 200 years created the foundation of a system that is designed to work for a particular group of people. That group of people are not Black, they're not Indian, they're not really many other different types of colors. And that's, I think, the point. So in grappling with this issue, I think two things are really important. One is how much are we stoking the hatred between different types of people? I think it's pretty clear one administration is doing that against the other. But I think the second thing that's really important is the willingness to acknowledge the systemic disadvantage that exists. There's a stark variety in the narrative that both sides, Republican and Democrat, are advancing on this issue of racism. I think if we're ever going to find a common ground, we really need to be able to start talking on from the same foundation. And so that's what I would say.
5 seconds. Thank you very much, Ishan. You're right on time. I appreciate that very much. Once again, a request to you to come a little bit closer to the mic because you do cut out now and then. And finally, for a 2-minute response or a comment, I go to Aziz. Aziz?
Sure, I really echo both of what's been said before, particularly around the systemic nature of racism in this country and how it has hindered and unjustly held back Black and Brown communities, but particularly the Black community with the legacy of slavery and so many other horrible things that have happened. One thing I will bring up now that in 2020, I think that a lot of attention has been brought to this issue, which is critical in terms of the public's knowledge and ability and interest in understanding these things more. But this is not new. These things have been happening for quite some time in very sophisticated ways, as was mentioned earlier regarding public policies. I think one thing that has been particularly disheartening and concerning right now in this election cycle is when one candidate goes on stage during a debate and basically incites or emboldens white supremacists. That's never happened. That is extremely dangerous narrative that has been, probably the most public of a number of other kind of dog whistle type acknowledgments to the alt-right. And this is an existential threat, I think, to so many communities of color in this country, and a reason why we cannot be silent, and we need to, stand up and acknowledge that this cannot be accepted in this country. And we need to also dig deeper and look at the more systemic issues that are happening here with regards to race in this country, and really have a reckoning with it, including in our own Indian community.
Thank you, Aziz. Very good view, right on time. And before I go to Sapna, I just want to let the general audience be aware that our very talented panelists from the discussions we've been hearing, the statistics that have just come out from them, they were not aware of any of these questions at all. Just goes to show how knowledgeable, wide-read our panelists are, which all of us are very appreciative of. Before I go to Sapna, I just want to make clear that all four of you in the 1 minute that is ahead of you on this same subject matter, given the time frame that you have, share your thoughts and an opinion if both administrations will not address this question adequately, or in your opinion, moving forward, one administration, as there's a greater likelihood, a greater chance of one administration addressing it to the best that it can in the right direction. So with that in mind, 1 minute each, and I'll begin with Sapna.
Yes, so I did want to acknowledge what Aziz mentioned actually, and this is obviously something that all of us are very, very passionate about, as we've been directly related to some of this racism in our school educations or in our regular communities. And something that she mentioned that I think is so important to bring up here is that as Indian people in our own brown community, the amount of racism that we allow it to happen within our own groups is just, it's not even, I can't even speak. I get very, very emotional about this because I've experienced this myself, whether it be on skin color or comments about, you know, someone is better than someone else and comparing people. It's just something that we need to eradicate. And then only can we look forward and comment on the way that the United States has been handling these issues. Something that Pranav mentioned, and I want to just also address, is that though I agree that I've been pretty dissatisfied with how both administrations have acknowledged these racist conditions in our country, I do think that we kind of have to pick a lesser of two evils in a way, and pick the administration that at least will bring this topic out and discuss it. So in my opinion, I believe I still follow the Biden administration. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Sapna. Pranav, you have any additional comments to make? You have a minute.
Sure. To answer the secondary question, I fully have all confidence that the Biden-Harris administration has at least the ammo and the willingness to hit this head on and fight systemic racism. A big win for the Indian community was Kamala Harris being nominated as the Democratic vice presidential nominee. So I'm hoping and praying that she can use her experiences as a woman of color to her advantage in a position of power.
Thank you very much, Pranav. Can we move on to Ishan for your thoughts?
Absolutely. I think it's pretty clear based on the debates that one candidate is willing to acknowledge systemic racism, the other is willing to stoke it. So I think it's pretty clear on this question alone. And to be honest, I find it a little bit disrespectful of Trump saying that he's been the one to do the most for the Black community, right? I mean, the Civil Rights Act passed, what, in 1965? Like, it's not about Abraham Lincoln. I think we have to be really clear about the facts here. I think to address the comment that was left in the chat, the idea about defund, I think one, it shows the necessity to reconsider what is at stake, what is so important, how can we actually address these systemic issues. And I think the willingness of the Biden administration to do so is very apparent. But I think the idea of defunding the whole police is not necessarily something that will work in America. I think what we have to embrace is how do we reimagine what the police should be? How can we staff the police with resources to be able to handle the variety of crises they do?
Thank you. Right on the buzzer, Pranav. That's very good, Ishan. I appreciate that. And I'm going to have the final comments on this subject by Aziz.
Sure. I just like to echo a lot of what's been said before. I think Ishan really took the words out of my mouth in terms of, considering how we can be creative moving forward and picking the candidate in the potential future administration that would be most receptive to advocacy, most receptive to organizing, most receptive to listening to the experiences of people that have been most affected by the systemic barriers and gaps that we have currently. And in my opinion, it is very clearly the Biden-Harris administration.
Thank you, Aziz. Thank you very much for that very intense debate and obviously addressing the concern that we had as to which administration going forward will be better equipped, as you said, to address the issue and not stoke the issue. We appreciate that. Let me pass it over to my co-moderator, Jaya.
Thank you, Prasad. Question number 4, we will be starting with Sapna, and then to Aziz, and then to Pranav for 2 minutes. And then we'll definitely have 1 minute opportunities for everyone, starting with Ishan right after the first 3 speakers. So this question, we would like to kind of explore how these 2 administrations or these 2 candidates will be looking at the election and how it proceeds and how it plays out at the end. So one of the pillars of democracy is really the peaceful transfer of power. In our own lifetime, we have gone to the Supreme Court to give us the outcome of the presidential election. Given the probability that the election results may not become official or sometime after the election, should the 2 administrations agree on a plan for peace and order in our nation? And if so, how? So with this, we will start with Sapna.
Yeah, so I definitely agree that there needs to be a peaceful transfer of power. I think that everyone has been aware of President Trump's very clear disagreement in that fact, and that he does not want to transfer power peacefully, which I never even thought was something that you could say. But, you know, we are in 2020 and this is the kind of stuff we're dealing with. And so I agree that this needs to be addressed. I think that there does need to be some sort of plan put in place from the Biden administration and the Trump administration on what the plan is, no matter which way this election goes. And I think that that plan needs to be made public. Like I mentioned earlier, it seems that as Americans, we are the last to ever learn about what's going on in the White House and what's going on with our government. And I think that this is something that needs to be addressed. I will say I'm not entirely sure how that document needs to be written. But in my opinion, I mean, I think it's pretty clear that no matter who the winner of the election might be, they need to acknowledge what has happened thus far and make a plan and a statement for how they plan to go forward. And what I mean by that is you need to acknowledge what's happened, whether it be the Trump administration who wins. He needs to acknowledge the mistakes and the issues that went on in these 4 years and how he plans to address them. And if it were Biden, I think that he should also acknowledge those 4 years of what should I say, misinformation to the American public, almost lies that we have been constantly seeing, and the mess of trying to solve those lies. And I think that those need to be, that plan needs to be very clearly indicated to us.
All right, thank you. Appreciate it. All right, so we're going to move next to Aziz for her response.
Sure. I think, you know, it's really sad and frustrating that sort of the state of our democracy has devolved into even having to really entertain if there won't be a peaceful transition of power. I think that's been a real hallmark of American democracy for so many years, and it's also been kind of been something that America has prided itself on and has centered a lot of its foreign policy objectives and priorities around. So I think it's really challenging that we have to think through that situation. I don't know if I'm qualified to necessarily have a recommendation about, you know, what could be done, you know, better in terms of ensuring that peaceful transition, but there absolutely needs to be a commitment to it. And obviously there is some challenges just given the situation with coronavirus and you know, complexities with that, but there absolutely needs to be a commitment to it, a very public verbal commitment to it and a mutual understanding, just simply out of respect for the American public who don't deserve to have this level of undermining of their own democratic freedom. And I think also moving forward, there should be a really deep and inward look at the way that our electoral system is currently structured. Are our elections representative of our country? Is the Electoral College even necessarily the most equitable way to ensure that our communities are being heard? These are all things that should be really deeply considered and reevaluated in a very strategic way, and including just the large amount of voter suppression and disenfranchisement we've seen. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. Thank you, Aziz. And we're going to move to Pranav for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Professor. This is a good question because when you look at the success of any team, any relationship, any sort of dynamic between two or more people, the key to success has always been communication and transparency. And so I think I need to see both of these parties come together on a neutral field and come to an agreement that regardless of which way the election goes, the other party needs to secede peacefully. And that's that. It will be a great disjustice to the American people if there is a ugly fight for the White House after, a couple weeks after the election. That's doing the American public a huge disservice. That will show a failure of democracy. And Aziz brings up a really good point in the Electoral College. You can look at the last election where the popular vote and the Electoral College vote aren't aligned. And that's not really, representative of a democracy. And to your point in the question of prior precedent of Supreme Court having a power in this, I think it should be eye-opening that the current administration is well on its way to nominating its third successful Supreme Court justice. And so you got to think about what kind of part that's going to play if the Supreme Court decides who's the next president.
Thank you. Thank you, Pranav. And we're going to move to 1 minute additional responses, starting with Ishan.
So a lot of my work focuses on the rising rates of authoritarianism globally and sort of how that's empowered by artificial intelligence and other technologies. And I think what we need to understand with the peaceful transition of power question is that there's more at stake than just partisan issues. It's not about Republican versus Democrat. It's about really the fate of democracy, how we model that democracy to the rest of the world. What are our institutions, like Pranav said about our Supreme Court, are our institutions capable and resilient enough to withstand populistic intentions? That's super crucial. I think we need to have that neutral framework, common grounding, to be able to create that sort of idea that there is an issue, there are issues beyond partisan issues. So a couple of things, right? Like I think a nonviolence pact should be administered with language that prevents any candidate from stoking or facilitating violence or encouraging people to commit violence. I think another thing is like identifying key issues like pandemic response and AI competition with India. So
thank you. So Aziz, 1 minute.
Sure. I think that I echo a lot of that, of what's been said before, and I don't have anything super original or new to add on, but just to say that we're in a really precarious time right now, and I think what happens and what unfolds over the next few weeks is going to be something that will be heavily reflected on for many, many, many years moving forward. So a lot is at stake right now with this election and what sort of happens with its handling.
Well said. Thank you. Thank you. Sapna?
Yeah, something I agree with Ishan is that this is not about partisan politics. This is more than that. And our global reputation, it just continues to go down. And I think that a lack of a peaceful transition of power will probably be the last thing that we need for our reputation. And I hope that whoever it may be is able to uphold that peaceful transition. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. And Pranav, for the last word.
I think everyone is on the same page here that, it needs to be a peaceful transfer of power. It is a shame that Americans have to think about this for our next election. you never know. Maybe if Biden and Kamala Harris end up winning this election, there might be some reform to the Electoral College, which eventually favors the American public. So I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of, not only ensuring a peaceful transfer of power for this upcoming election, but also making sure that the American public is more versed and more informed on the implications of one vote.
All right. Thank you so much to all four of you. I mean, what I'm sure Prasad would agree, and as would Hari as well as Sharmaji, that what we've been hearing is, you are really taking it to that global perspective. You are looking at our nation, how others will see us, and that's important to you. And that speaks a lot to this generation. So thank you so much. So we will move on to the next question, and over to you, Prasad.
Thank you, Jaya, very much. If you remember earlier on, we had talked about the first 4 questions, which would have a certain format. And I'm hoping time will permit for both me and Jaya to ask one more question before we take questions from the audience for the panelists, which is also on the cards for this evening, the last 10 to 15 minutes. So my final question will be to all the panelists. Each one of you will be given 2 minutes, and we will not have the minute extra for the concluding comments. So we will begin with Sapna, go on to Pranav, Aziz, and Ishan. And of course, I'll remind who the next person is if needed, but we'll begin with Sapna. This is a land of opportunity. And that is why your families, most probably your parents, came to this country. But we are where we are today in 2020. In your personal experience, which we would like to hear from, do you still think this is the land of opportunity? Please go back to your experiences in school as far as you want to go. And for those of you who are in the workforce, your experiences there as well. Is America, in your opinion, the land of opportunity today? And we will begin with Sapna.
Yes, this is a question I think my parents bring up quite often in our house. They think, did we make the right choice coming here? Is this what you wanted? Did we fulfill what we had hoped? And I think, yes, I do think that America is still the land of opportunity. Regardless of what's been going on politically, I still think that the decision to come here and to allow me to have this better education and experiences that I've been able to have, I do think that I'm lucky and that they made the right choice. I don't think that, at least for me personally, these past 4 years with this election and this administration, I've been through college. I know some of my peers here also have. And though it definitely made an impact on many different ways in my college experience, whether it be, through seeing my friends with student loans and how they went through that and seeing how policy greatly impacts that, or other people that I had heard who needed reproductive help and what happened with that. These policies do definitely impact the day-to-day lives, but I also can't deny the fact that I got this opportunity for my job, and I don't think I would have gotten it had I grown up in India. Getting the opportunity to try anything that I wanted and do anything that I wanted, the sky is the limit. My parents started a small business. They're business owners. I don't think that they would have had that experience if they were still in India. So I do think that it's still the land of opportunity. I just think that there's a lot of work to be done in terms of fixing those policies and making it as great as it is and making it seem that way to, the rest of the world around us. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sapna, for sharing that good rosy picture, which I'm sure your parents are thankful for, and so are we, your extended family. Pranav?
Sure. So when I think of the immigration system, it's hard to acknowledge the positive parts of it because the immigration system is broken. I mean, looking at my parents' story alone, and whenever I talk about just basic issues, they always talk about some of the things that were more difficult that my sister and I never had to endure. And it reminds me of one of my teammates from this last school year. I'm on the swim team at my school. And during my 4 years, we had an international teammate from Malaysia. And it was astounding that I would talk to him on the plane, on the bus, to different meets at the hotel. And just like some of the things that he's going through as an international student are the same things that my dad went through when he was coming here. It's like in so many years, so many decades have gone by and it's still the same experience. So is this a land of opportunity? Yes, it is. But it's really hard to, you know, ignore the many hardships that immigrants from the South and, you know, overseas have to endure just to be able to set up a normal life here. It's astonishing that countries in Europe, all over Europe, are actually setting up special visas for immigrants who have a business idea or consider themselves specifically an entrepreneur. I think the US should take advantage of that opportunity and incentive. And also, if we are truly the land of opportunity, why is there a limit on highly qualified immigrants? We literally put a limit on how many highly qualified immigrants are allowed to apply for citizenship. It's a really broken system. Yes, it is the land of opportunity, but there's lots of work that needs to be done to fully make that the case.
Thank you, Pranav. Thank you very much. Can I request Aziz?
Sure. I think this is a really interesting question and something that I've been reflecting on a bit. I think that there has been a lot of really challenging things that have happened this year, but then also the past 4 years, and even just reflecting broadly in other courses and other things. I do think that this is I still consider this to be the land of opportunity. However, I don't think it's the land of opportunity for everyone. I think that there are people and communities that have been systemically left out of the opportunity to create wealth, as was mentioned before, as the opportunity to have the same robust education that I've been afforded living in a suburb in Connecticut. It's very different going into Hartford, or it's very different going into Bridgeport or New Haven. So these disparities are striking, and thinking about even the legacy of immigration of our community, and these are obviously in very general terms, and I can only speak from also my own experience and my family. I think, our community has come to this country mostly on a legacy of privilege and of certain educational and professional status, which allowed us to come here. It's different. It's a very different one, I think, than a lot of other immigrant communities, and something that I think requires a bit of reflection and thought about, what that means for us and sort of how we move forward with that. I think when it comes to the land of opportunity here, and in my own experience, I've been thinking a lot about service, public service, and also giving back, but also thinking about what I can do to promote social justice and equity while being here, and thinking about those lessons from my family and also within my faith. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And finally, for 2 minutes with Ishan.
So I think my personal experience has created a very optimistic outlook on just how things work. I think my dad ran a small business as a dentist, self-employed. My mom, just like my family together, providing like a collective loving home. I feel like that's just a rare experience for so many people in the world, right? Like the billions of people that are here, how many can actually say, they had an environment that fostered creativity, that challenged you to really critically think about the issues that you have, to put in the hard work to make your ideas manifest. I think those are ideas that just are not shared with so many people. And so I think, being born in the West, I think there's this philosopher, Peter Singer, who calls it like winning the humanity lottery, right? Because you have presented with you so many opportunities here. But also at the same time, I think on an objective sense, it's, and Aziz also took the words out of my mouth, right? It doesn't work for everyone. I think that there's an important recognition there, is that what society have we created? Is it one that encourages sort of propping up the people who have built this country, right? Immigrants are the foundation of our country. We facilitate that. Right now, if you look at small businesses or you look at startup scenes, like one of the reasons why the US is like the leading innovation economy of the world is because of immigrants. People want to come here. How can we actually facilitate that and improve that so that we maximize returns for everyone? I think that that's so important. That's not happening right now. We've created an immigration system that discourages people from coming, that creates a deep sense of fear and uncertainty about what future lies ahead if they come to the US. So I think that there's a real necessity to acknowledge that. While on the one hand, I appreciate the ability of democracy and human rights to have voice discontent, we also have to make sure that all people can.
Thank you. And I want to take this opportunity to thank all the panelists for being so much on time. I've not needed to remind too many of you at all, which is fabulous. And for the final question of the evening, before we go to the public segment, I will turn it over to my co-moderator, Jaya.
Thank you, Prasad. So this question actually relates very closely to the previous one. We talked about the land of opportunity. And, you know, our families, my parents, perhaps your parents, perhaps even your grandparents would have been the ones who immigrated here. But they did it in a legal way. You know, they had a vision and for education, as Aziz mentioned. And some of us, you know, have had our degrees elsewhere, but then have started businesses, as Sapna's dad. So, but it was legal. But in your opinion, which administration is better equipped to handle our illegal residents and the dreamers? So 2 minutes only, and there is no 1 minute option later. So everyone gets a chance to answer this one, and we'll be starting with Aziz.
Sure, this is a definitely a very hot button topic, and something that I am not personally very well versed in. So just to say that as a disclaimer, but some of the things, well, in my graduate studies, one area that I have learned quite a bit about is humanitarian assistance and humanitarian health. Something that I've been reflecting on as well, and was quite evident in this last debate, was the treatment and inhumanity in which this administration has been treating migrants who are seeking asylum and refuge, cornerstones of humanitarian action in this country. The fact that over 500 children don't know where their parents are is an absolute abomination in everything that we stand for as a country. And South Asians are included in that as well. I remember the report of I think a 6-year-old Sikh girl who died in an Arizona desert. You know, this impacts people, you know, our community as well. And as far as legal immigration and, you know, which administration would make it better or worse, I think a lot about what the Trump administration has done to make legal immigration harder. With respect to its currently H-1B visas are being frozen. And H-1B visas, I think over 70% of holders of H-1B visas are of Indian descent. So these are people that are looking to make meaningful contributions in our society, and it's much harder for them to do that and to contribute. And also, I just saw a CNN alert today that said that J-1 visas, they're visitor visas for about 1 year of specialized training in the United States, and even those are at risk of. There was a rule that was proposed by the Trump administration by DHS to even roll that back. So when this is, you know, when we're talking about legal and illegal immigration, the Trump administration has done so many things and has centered its racist rhetoric around, you know, excluding people and making it America first.
Thank you.
So it's challenging.
We're going to move to Sapna.
Yes. So I think illegal immigration, like Aziz had mentioned, is definitely a hot button topic. I think it's something that we definitely need to acknowledge. And in the question of deciding which administration is going to, you know, take this and make sure that we acknowledge both the importance of fair and just immigration, and also acknowledge the fact that so many people are seeking this land of opportunity and are trying their hardest to get here, whether that be through illegal or legal means. I think that the answer is quite clear in Biden, solely because he has on multiple occasions acknowledged the fallacies in the decisions that him and President Obama made through their administration, and is willing to have that conversation. When we think about the Trump administration and their response to immigration, the first thing that I hear in my head is build a wall. And I think it's something that we can't forget. You know, the gut reaction from this administration has constantly been racism and demoralizing comments. And, you know, it's absurd to me, the behavior that we see on the news or on TV from the highest office in our country. And so I think that with President Biden, with potential President Biden, that we see at least a hope that, you know, urgent action be taken and that asylum seekers be something that we commit to. And so I hope that if that is the case, that we are able to, you know, improve on all those areas. But I hope that if the opposite happens and we have President Trump back again, that he acknowledges the decisions that he's made in this administration. Thanks.
Thank you, Sapna. Thank you so much. We're going to move to Pranav.
Thank you, Professor. So to answer your question, I think if we want to combat the issue of illegal immigration, I think first we have to look at the process for legal immigration. Maybe if it wasn't so hard to gain access over the border in a legal way, become a citizen, maybe many people from countries like Mexico wouldn't have to take cardboard rafts to Texas or Florida. When we restrict immigration on that level, it hinders our economy in the long term. I mean, I think Aziz mentioned it earlier, like our entrepreneurial economy is based on so many immigrants. Our current administration, the head of the administration right now, the guy in the White House, comes from an immigrant family. So I think when you fix legal immigration, you're going to invite a lot more people to not resort to very unorthodox methods of getting into the country. So the current administration has an extremely inhumane approach to this. And instead of using our taxpayer money to build what seems like a hypothetical wall at this point, you know, why not put that towards immigration reform and, you know, create some bills or any movement that helps ease the process of inviting immigrants to our country. So with that being said, I think Biden and Harris have the right mindset and the right idea to tackle this issue.
Thank you. Thank you. Seconds to spare. I appreciate that. All right, we're going to go to Ishan.
So I think the important thing first to acknowledge is like immigration is it a good thing, right? And I think if you look at the facts, right, you look at key studies, IMF recently came out with an analysis that says it just improves the GDP of all advanced economies. Like having immigrants improves the GDP of advanced economies. This is not just a singular person issue related to migrants. It's a collective American issue, right? That there's potential benefit for all of us. I think if you look at the generational contribution, even if migrants tax the social welfare system as a first generation, the contributions of generations after of those families far outpace. I think it's like $50,000 negative in the initial sense and $200,000 added over time for each generation. It just makes sense on a pure basis. And lastly, if you look at the demographics question, one of the key reasons and strategic advantages the United States has relative to China is that we have a strong demographic basis to facilitate and feed our economy. That's probably going to be like the one that's not talked about enough, but that's probably one of our key advantages going forward in this great power competition that continues to emerge. So given that, I think what we have to understand is that, and something I worked on in 2017 is, at the Government Accountability Project, was analyzing the state-sponsored child abuse of over 2,000 migrant children from the Trump administration in ICE family detention facilities. This is not fiction. This is fact recorded by pictures and analysis of actual people. Is how are we treating these people? Why would they want to come here? Are we discouraging that or are we encouraging that? And so the final note that I want to make is sort of related to what Pranav said, is that we have to get smart about immigration. We have to actually think about what capacity infrastructure do we have as the world's #1 leading country? Can we afford to actually increase immigration and do so in a way that doesn't stoke fears and anxiety for people, but also improves the economic output of our country and migrants collectively? I think there's a win-win here.
All right. There we go. Excellent. Thank you so much. And what I would like to say to all of you, each of Sapna, to Pranav, Ishan, and Aziz, I think you have all ably represented our young generation of Indian Americans. And we are ever so proud of all of you. we look forward to your continued involvement in the civic, in the social, the economic, and perhaps the political landscape of our nation. You quoted statistics, you were very knowledgeable, you have a keen understanding of policy. Several of you cited policies, and you are more interested in, you're definitely looking at the global perspective, not just the nation itself, not just everybody. It's not about just the one family. It's about everyone in this country, as well as what we present or represent to the entire world. And that we want to, get that standing back. A lot of you, all of you, I think, mentioned the Paris Accord. You are definitely, you do us proud, and we are so, so happy to have had you participate in this panel. So I am going to, I think, send it to Hari, who might have had some questions, additional questions, if we have time.
Thank you, Jayaji. And certainly during the discussion, I was doing multitasking, and I did not mean to that, but because we were broadcasting this program on YouTube and Facebook, so I was looking, and I'm really thrilled that I think in New England, we are doing this with the youth, so I got overwhelmed response. But unfortunately, we are not able to address all the questions, but I was going through and summarizing quickly from all those media, from Facebook, YouTube. So I have a couple of questions here, and probably we can go with the 1 minute. And I would like to go with the first question, which I saw from the lot of folks, that how do you reflect your life on Indian and American values? And can we go with 1 minute from each participant, speaker? Is that okay? Because I'm just looking the timing also. So, okay, so I would like to start with the, we can go with the sequence, Ajiz, then Ishan, Shapna, and Pranav. So Ajiz.
Sure. I think it's something that's ever evolving for me personally. I think I'm always learning something new about myself and my heritage, and how my upbringing here in the United States and the values that my family has instilled with me are always intersecting and working together. Just this weekend, I was writing a paper about the partition and thinking about the socio-political consequences of such an enormous event in South Asian history. And it was just such a, I think, really intense experience writing that paper, but also talking with my grandparents and my parents and listening to their lived experiences. So I think my short answer is that I'm still learning how to reflect, and still figuring things out every day. So that's what I've got on that one.
Thank you, Ajiz. And Ishan.
Yeah, so I think a lot about just the world in a global perspective, not just as a U.S. citizen, not just as an Indian immigrant, but just in general. And I think one of the things that makes me the proudest to have Indian heritage is the commonality of moral framework that both countries share. The support of rule of law, the support of dissent, the support of democratic processes overall. I think what I'm most excited for is, in the decades to come, the increasing role that India will play in shaping the international rules, in understanding how the U.S. should operate vis-a-vis China. And so it makes me really proud to be from Indian heritage. I think that shows throughout at my home, doing jyot every night, and just in general, just how we, I think, engage with our culture and keep that alive is part of what makes both the U.S. but also India so great.
All right, thank you. And next to Sapna.
Yes, so I have to kind of echo what Ishan had said earlier. I'm so lucky for the upbringing that I got from my parents. I have to thank them for making me, go to the temple when they wanted me to go, and sit through those singing lessons that I didn't think were the best thing ever when I was a little kid, or, go to Bharatanatyam classes all the way in India and come back here. And it was quite an experience that I had with my upbringing. And Like Aziz mentioned, I'm still learning, of course, and I'm so lucky. I'm so thankful. And I think that something that was mentioned in the earlier question of the land of opportunity is, we live in a melting pot here in the United States. Though this was my upbringing, yet other peers of mine have Mexican heritage and how they have experienced that. I mean, Day of the Dead is coming up, or one of my friends is Native American and what her experiences are like. And so it's really amazing that here in America, we can all learn from each other's cultures and experience these things together. And yeah, I'm just so thankful. So I definitely have been able to, I think, delve a little bit into my Indian side and also meld that with my American side. So yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Sapna. And Pranav.
Yeah, this is an awesome question. I just want to kind of bring it back to our parents and how much work they've done for us, raising us in an Indian American household. It's been a while since I've been to India, unfortunately. I hope to return very soon. But when I was there, some of the things that I took away was just like the natural and rich history of, India and what it has to offer the world. And so I really think that it's up to our generation, us four panelists here, to continue to promote and bring Indian culture to the forefront. As a swimmer for almost 10 years, I had the opportunity to have teammates over who would see the different deities across the house, and they would ask, what is this God about? Like, what does he do? And to see such genuine interest in our culture and a willingness from my teammates and friends in the past to learn more about Indian culture, that's very promising for me at least.
Thank you so much. And I think keeping in mind, because it is already 9:02, I do have various questions, but we are not able to take those, but certainly we will post in our Milan. So first of all, congratulations to Aziz, Ishan, Sapna, and Pranav for great hold on tough subjects: racism, climate change, immigration, U.S. economy, and again, 2020 presidential election. So now I would like to, because here when I see in this whole hour and a half, moderator role is quite challenging. Keeping discussion on track, covering all aspects of maintaining synergy. So thanks to Dr. Prasad Srinivasan and Professor Jaya Vijayasekhar for keeping us bar so high and maintaining this. Now I would like to request our Milan chairman, Suresh Sharma ji, to conclude today's discussion. And I apologize for all the participants, really, because I saw a lot of participation from the students, entrepreneur, and I know personally some of them. So really, but we are not able to take up all those questions. So really sorry for that. So over to Sharma ji.
Thank you, Hari. It's very emotional moment for me. I'll just share one story with you. When I just thought of having this panel discussion, I just thought of adults, 40 to 50 years above. And I talked to Dr. Prasad. I said, we want to do this thing. He said, it's a very good idea. And then next day he came out, with one suggestion. He said, why don't we, add a younger generation into this? I said, but this is a political type of things, What these children will do, they won't have, that kind of knowledge, He said, why don't we give it a trial? I said, okay, if you want, we'll give it a try. And the way I see these youngsters, the four of them, the knowledge, the subject matter they handle, the spectrum in which They looked into the whole, critical issues. I am a man of conviction, I never lose anything. And I have faced a lot of obstacles and how to overcome and all those. But, losing is not a good feeling. But it is the first time I personally feel that I am feeling very, very happy in being a loser of what I was thinking of these younger generation. And the way they moved into a society with their educational backgrounds and the knowledge they depicted, my not only hats off, my salutation to you. And Dr. Prasad, really, I'm thankful to you for giving this opportunity. And as a very small token of appreciation to these 4 youngsters, a small token, we want to offer $101 to each of you. Thank you very much. And I really, we, myself, Hari, and of course, Prasad and Jaya, we are really very, 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 right from the heart, I'm saying we are proud of you. Thanks a lot. And, keep the spirit of keeping your heritage, your capabilities to make America, strong. That's what, we need. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Appreciate that.
Thank you so much, everybody. So we are concluding today's session, and definitely I saw the message. Please make a plan to vote. So certainly we were holding, and this will help us to decide. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining.
Send me your mailing addresses, please.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
so
everyone.
much.
All the best.